why that's why here at Search we try to give them that wraparound services so they feel comfortable and have the necessary documentation that they need to help with finding a job.
All right, so myth or fact, people experiencing homelessness want to be homeless?
That's false. Homelessness is more like a situation. What I've come across is that a lot of people have exhausted their options to where they've tried to live with relatives, friends. They've gone to like Salvation Army, Star of Hope, but it doesn't last. And so we try to pinpoint where they are. We utilize stages of change. So a lot of clients are in pre-contemplation. So we have to meet them where they are. And we know that homelessness is dangerous. So we do our best to continuously engage them and let them know that we are here to support them when they are ready to, for us to help them provide services. As Taylor said, like the ID is an issue, Social Security is an issue, and so we try to meet them there first and take them step by step as we go.
Myth or fact, if we just had more shelter beds, people wouldn't be homeless?
So even though shelters are amazing, that's a short release or like a band-aid effect to the overall issue. And I think what we try to do here at Search and with the Way Home program period is trying to put a into that cycle of continuous homelessness, whether it be for extended periods of times or people frequently finding themselves in this situation. So even with Search in the last 10 years, we've been able to house 25,000 people, which is a really big deal because we're not just helping them temporarily, we're giving them the support that they need to overcome these barriers for a longer period of time. And again, shelters are great, but they become overcrowded. They have rules. No one wants to go somewhere where they feel they can't be themselves or they have to, watch their back or watch their items to see if someone's going to steal them or feel like I can't get a good sleep because is someone going to do something when I close my eyes. Also, we have certain vulnerable populations like our LGBTQ community in feeling comfortable in the area that they are, or if I'm a trans individual, will I be able to stay with the sex that I feel comfortable with rather than being, oh no, you have to go into this certain side because this is our rules. Some shelters are lockdown facilities where you go in but you cannot come and go as you please. So it's a feeling of, I don't have my individuality, I don't have my independence. Just like we wouldn't want to go into any situation where we were unsure if we're going to be treated fairly or if it was going to be safe. Some people are like, hey, if I'm going to take those chances, I'd rather take those chances out in the street where I can move around than somewhere where I feel isolated and where I feel like I can't find my own way.
Myth or fact, all people panhandling at street corners are homeless?
This is a myth. It is a fact that many of our clients we work with on outreach do panhandle as a means of survival. Just because someone's homeless doesn't mean they don't need money. But we also, like, as we've housed more and more people, we run into housed individuals who are trying to supplement their own income while they're in housing. If you think about something like SSI, which is pays monthly about $770, 30% of that's going to housing. So you're left with $500, $540 for the rest of the month. That's food, that's bills, that's clothing. If someone doesn't have reliable transportation or a criminal background or they lack employable skills, panhandling is a mean to supplement that income. It's cash, it's immediate. So yes, a lot of our clients use panhandling as a means to survive, but we're seeing more and more people panhandling who are in housing. So if you're ever in doubt, water is especially during the summer months, great thing to give to people. Keep survival kits in your car, a little bit of food, a little water in a gallon bag, rather than money. It's that's usually a best practice.
Myth or fact, homelessness can happen to anyone.
That is true. That's a fact. I mean, there's so many situations where people end up homeless, per se, natural disasters or the house caught on fire and burnt down. There's like many factors, some mental issues to where individuals' parents have passed away and they just aren't able to like grasp reality at the moment. So they just wind up losing it all. And not only that, I mean, I've believe it or not, had a mini experience of homelessness myself. I've actually lived in my car for 6 months through the winter. My grandmother passed away, and family issue where, yeah, my aunts and uncles couldn't get along. They kicked me out. I couldn't stay with them. I stayed in my car. I went to local gyms to take showers, and I just did what I could for that time. So it can happen to anyone at any given time. So yeah, that's the gist of it, I would say.
Myth or fact, Houston's homeless problem is one of the worst in the country. This one is absolutely false. Houston is leading the way in homelessness. It is something that we're very, very proud of. Sonny, can you do the next slide? Phil, you want to share a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. You've heard us talk about the way home. It's from started in 2011. Over the last 10 years, we've gone from about over 9,000 people per night experiencing homelessness to right around 3,000. It was a community-wide effort to combine our efforts and our resources in really strategic ways, and it allowed for agencies like Search to take charge in our own area of expertise, which is housing. There was no reason why 5 different agencies in one general area should be competing to provide the same service. So we scaled back the basic needs services like showers and hot meals and being a day shelter, so we can focus and really ramp up our housing efforts and our housing support. If you look at how Houston does per capita based on other large cities, and even smaller cities like Austin, we are doing really amazing things. And yes, there was a slight increase after Harvey and during COVID. And that was really, it just shines light on the fact that people were right there on the fringes. They were doubling up, they were couch surfing. And if your name is not on a lease and that apartment or home gets destroyed, FEMA is not going to be able to provide you any sort of assistance because technically you didn't live there. So our city has, it's our approach. We've championed like a very bold, solution-focused approach. You've heard us talk about how complex the issue of homelessness is. And those complex problems require solutions that are innovative and well thought out. And writing tickets, arresting people with nowhere to go, criminalizing homelessness is not innovative. You've seen it in Austin, particularly. They just move people from one place to another. They write tickets to people who can't pay them. And they become bench warrants. They get arrested. Punishment-based approaches. They harm people and they waste money. And I'm not advocating that it should be a free-for-all and anyone should do anything anytime. But the solution starts with a housing first approach before someone can get a job, can get a grip on their own mental health or their own sobriety. Housing is the first step. the problem is complex. The solution is fairly simple. It's housing first. The approach is what takes, the methodology is what takes the innovation. It takes leadership that make, courageous decisions, and are willing to be creative and bold in how we tackle the problem. And Houston leads the way in that. We've got the city of Houston. We've got leading agencies like Search, initiatives like The Way Home, who are willing to forge our own way. And now cities are modeling what they do off of what we do. I remember one of my first years at Search, a group from Atlanta came and talked to us, and they were like, what are y'all doing and how can we do it? And it's moving away from that punitive criminalization of homelessness and really focusing on what the solutions are, rather than let's shift people from one place to another. Let's write tickets, because that's easy. You can write tickets all day. That's not solving the problem.
Okay, so what is homeless outreach? What does that mean? Search has multiple outreach teams. What does it actually mean to do this work? So homeless outreach is really kind of a concept of taking services, homeless services that maybe traditionally were done in like day centers, and like taking them out to the street to try and engage with people who may not necessarily come in. Right. When people are living on the street, they have all of their things, all of their possessions in one place. They might have animals, they might have pets. If they leave, they can lose everything. Right. And like, we know that. So taking the services out lets us gain trust and access to people who may not otherwise come in. And so we work with people who are experiencing what kind of HUD in our community defines as literal homelessness. So literal homelessness are people who are living unsheltered. So they're not marginally housed, they're not double bunked, they're not, kind of temporarily staying somewhere. They truly have no place else to go. And they're living in what's called a place not meant for human habitation. And so there's very specific ways that we actually document that. But essentially, it means that they're living outside. They're living in a structure that's not permanent. They're living in places without electricity, running water, those kinds of things. It could be a car, it could be a vacant building, it could be a tent, it could just be under an underpass. Literal homelessness also is going to be people who are living in shelters, right? Who are temporarily staying there, or sometimes they're staying there for longer periods. But this is the target population for outreach. So we go out into the streets to serve these people with a goal of trying to bring them back in or to provide the services to them. We call this population kind of the unsheltered population, or sometimes the street population. I think it's also important to kind of note that just because someone is currently out on the street during the day, it doesn't really mean that they're meeting that literal definition of homelessness or that they're unsheltered. And so our teams work really carefully to try and distinguish the difference between someone who's literally homeless, and maybe someone who's just hanging out. We kind of call that like a street culture. A lot of times the clients that we serve when we move off the street go back out to the street for their community, their sense of friendship and camaraderie, right? And so some of the work we do is trying to distinguish the difference. Years ago, outreach used to be really focused on kind of a light touch. And the idea was around making sure that people are comfortable on the street, right? That they have the things they need. So taking out, sack lunches and, socks and bottled water. And our teams still do that, but we pair it with a progressive engagement approach. And so we go out and we go to the same spots frequently over and over again to really work with a targeted group of people and with a focus of housing. We're not just trying to keep people comfortable on the street. We really want to get them off of the street. And for most people, the answer to that is housing. So I'm going to turn it over to Lavoy and Taylor to tell us a little bit more about who this population really is. They work with these folks day in and day out.
So like we were saying earlier, homelessness can touch anyone. I think most people understand, most of us are one paycheck away from being in the same situation of most of our clients. So some of our clients, of course, they are dealing with substance abuse or mental health, but some of our clients, we have IDDs to where I have a client, he was not only could he not read or write, but he had a mental health injury that literally limits him from being able to get on the bus by himself because he wouldn't know when to get off. So if somebody made him an appointment for housing to get to where he needed to go, he was unable to. So we kind of helped fill that gap with being able to transport clients. We have clients who are they're just down on their luck. They just got evicted. They're with their kids. They're trying to work. They're doing all of this, but there's so many situations with life that is going on that they just can't get a steady foothold right now. So they just need someone who can help point them to the resources and help. Even if it's just checking in. I tell my clients, check in with me weekly. So I know what you need from me. So I know how to help you. So we can make sure that we continuously going in the correct direction to help you get housed and help you get off the street.
And an interesting thing is some clients that we run into, actually, they've been attorneys and medical doctors and have lost it all. So they have a whole different approach to homelessness and different demands and expectations. But we just continuously, at the stages of change, we have to meet them where they are. So we take it from there.
And some people, it's really hard to ask for help. Some people, they get so, clients, when you're in survival mode, you find ways of coping. You find ways of dealing with your situation that you're in. So sometimes it's not that, oh, I don't want help. Sometimes, I've been conditioned that a man is supposed to take care of himself and his family and you don't ask for help. So that it puts them in this mindset. Or we get a lot of clients who are being released from being incarcerated and they don't know what their next step is. If I've been incarcerated I have a client for 27 years, 9 years, where do I start once I get out? So sometimes it's not that I don't want help. Sometimes I don't know the resources. When I'm in school and I got introduced with search because I was looking at what resources were around and search popped out, but I rode around for days and I didn't know where I could go or what I was looking for, and I didn't actually need the services. So sometimes letting them know what the resources are and who can help with what, like Phil was saying, is we delegate and work with other organizations so we can provide that wraparound service that they need.
So outreach does have some best practices, and this is from USICH, which is the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, right? And USICH kind of indicated some of these outreach best practices, and these are, I would say, all things that search outreach teams do. But just in the interest of time, I want to highlight a few things that I think are kind of unique and special. So one, coordinated entry. If you've done any work with search or been to any of these speaker series, you've probably heard us talk about how people access housing. And it's through what we call here in Houston a coordinated access system. So it's a way that we prioritize people for housing. We assess their vulnerability and we assess what they're eligible for. And then we really try and match them to solutions that will work for them. It's very complicated. That's a very simplistic view. But the idea is really that you're helping people who are most vulnerable get to housing first. And in the case of outreach and the clients that we serve on the street, these are some of the people that are probably the least likely to be able to make it on their own, right? So coordinated access helps make sure that people who are on the street in the worst situations gain access to housing the fastest. And all of our outreach teams, every outreach specialist is trained to do those coordinated access assessments right out on the street. So it's not about trying to convince someone to come in and do it. We do it right there. We use technology out there in the field to conduct the assessment. And then we also pin and keep geographical location of where those people are so that we can go back and find them when housing becomes available for them. That kind of leads to some of these other high quality data points, right? For years, outreach was not really recording data into our system, into our HMIS system, our data management system for the community. And kind of a few years ago, we really got smart to realizing that if outreach is one of the main doors to housing, we have to keep tabs on where people are, right? And so our data systems, we track where everybody's staying, what services they're accessing, and we use all of that information to help make sure that, again, people who need housing are getting to it, and that outreach teams are not duplicating efforts on the street. It also is really helpful for our teams like Taylor and Lavoie, who work in specific regions, to doing like hot spotting. And what hot spotting is that you look at concentrations of people and where they're staying. And usually they're concentrations of people with really high vulnerabilities, really complex cases, maybe lots of substance use all in one spot, or serious mental illness, and that kind of they formed a community and a hot spot on the map. And so then we try to address that entire spot. You can't just work with one person. You really have to work with everybody there to try and break up the hot spot in the location, right? And I think another thing too is the collaboration with non-traditional partners. And the team will talk about this a little bit more. But outreach isn't just search, it's all these other organizations, and some organizations that traditionally haven't really worked with homeless services before, but we see a lot of overlap. So for instance, law enforcement, right? Homelessness is a problem for law enforcement in so many ways, but how can we work together to try and address the issue? And our Midtown Management Project is doing a really good example of that. So to kind of next slide, a little bit about Search's outreach teams. We have kind of 4 distinct outreach department kind of functions here at Search. So we have a mobile team that's state funded, and there's 2 outreach specialists, and these guys go all across the city and the county doing outreach work and doing some of those assessments and helping people gain access to housing. We also have a PATH outreach team, and PATH is SAMHSA funded, so it has a real focus on mental health connection. We work closely with the Harris Center, who also has a PATH grant. But the 2 here and the teams that are here today are the management districts teams and then the encampment response team. So in the management district, we have a relationship with the downtown management district. We also have a relationship with the midtown management district. So these are privately funded projects with kind of multidisciplinary teams who are really geographically focused on these areas. And then we recently added an encampment response team, which is coming from COVID related funding to try and help the homeless encampment issue as a public health issue. So I'm going to turn it over to Lavoie and Taylor again to talk a little bit more about downtown and midtown management districts and their work.
So I'm in Midtown, I'm Lavoie. So as Alexa was stating earlier, we've been focusing on hotspots. Now to get to those hotspots, like at Search, we can go out there by ourselves, but see in Midtown, we are big on collaboration. So we collaborate with HPD, the sheriffs, Metro PD, and the SEAL team. And we're trying to get with HCC as well, because there are certain individuals in those areas. But so we, with the efforts of the collaborations of HPD and the sheriffs and all, we can, like everyone knows the Thumb in downtown, or not down, Midtown, the Greyhound bus station. That's one of the hardest places to engage in. That's my area. So it's easier for me to filter out the good from the bad, if everyone knows what I mean pertaining to that area, because you have inmates dropped off at the Greyhound, you have drug dealers, and you have the homeless, then you have the addicted. So when we collaborate with those other entities, it's like a parting of ways, so you actually see who's literally homeless. So we're able to primarily focus on those who are actually living there on the streets than those that are just per se panhandling or just just out there to have a good time. So so we're I think and it's even getting better. So we're able to we're trying to work with Avenue 360 as well, to where I can have some of my clients have their disabilities verified. So yeah, I mean it's some great things are going on, and it's going to get better, and we're cleaning up. You'll see. I guess everyone will see how things are.
Before Taylor tells you about downtown, I do want to just kind of brag about Lavoie and Midtown. So the Midtown project is fairly new still. We've only been doing this work for just over a year, and Lavoie is one of the two outreach specialists who do this work. But I think what's also really unique about Midtown is Midtown has a heavy residential population, right? There are a lot of community members who live there and are really concerned about the homeless situation in Midtown. And so part of Lavoie's work and that team's work is also working with concerned homeowners, right? And we attend law enforcement meetings. Midtown is a central point of many different law enforcement entities. I think there's like 7 total that overlap down there. We work with all of them. And we also work with homeowners. We join the monthly meeting that they have about different issues, and we join and answer questions there too, not specific questions about the clients that we're working with, right, but in general. And we share the work we're doing. In Midtown and downtown, they're using part of their public safety budgets, which traditionally have gone to like things like law enforcement, right? They're diverting some of those funds to fund these homeless service projects. Now in downtown, Search is just one organization. We also work closely with the Harris Center, who receives funding from Downtown Management, and the Coalition from the Homeless as well. So Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about downtown and your work there?
Yes. So with downtown, we have a little less engagement with the law enforcement, but we have a lot, we lean heavily on the Harris Center. We collaborate with them a lot because our side of the population, I mean, we both see it a lot, but mental health and substance abuse. So the Harris Center helps us get connected with those mental health services. And they also have a sheriff that rides around with them. So they're able to help transport clients, whether it be to appointments or if clients wants to go into jail diversion just to get them off the street and help them get medications or anything else they need. They can help transport that client there. I think another unique part about the DMD team is my partner is a peer recovery specialist. So we can kind of give them that mental health and substance abuse connections and resources as soon as we touch them. So if they're ready to get connected or they need a counselor that they need to talk to, I can make a call right then and there and set them up an appointment to either come to Search, or Harris Center is great with coming out there with us to meet the client where they are. Because some of the times it's really hard to get a client to come in just with different barriers that they're dealing with. So we are very leaning heavily towards getting them connected to the services, giving them that wraparound service, and that extensive case management to get them started on that process of housing.
We're so lucky to have the partnership of Downtown and Midtown. So both of these entities, our teams, Taylor and Lavoie, both work in their office spaces. They meet with, in downtown, they have different street guides, public safety guides that you see frequently in downtown. And Taylor will go to line up with these staff to hear what's on their docket for today, what they're seeing, what they're concerned about, right? So she's an immediate support and collaborator with them on what they're seeing in downtown. And then we kind of work with them at all different levels too, right? So, I participate occasionally in some of like their board meetings or with their senior leadership team. Our managers connect together about monthly, and we're really targeting clients and priorities that are mutual. So, in the downtown management district, there are so many businesses there, right? And homelessness and some of these individuals can cause a lot of problem and disruption for the businesses. And so the DMD team will bring these cases to us, and then we will try and really directly assess and work with them and provide updates so that we're all kind of communicating and clear about what's happening and nobody just feels like nothing is moving. So it's a really unique project. I don't know of anything else quite like it. The other kind of unique project that we have here is our encampment response outreach team, which is a new team. And so I'll turn that over to Phil to share a little bit about what we're doing there.
Yeah, encampment, that's my team. They not everyone experiencing homelessness resides in an encampment, but they're very visible, and they're an indication of the issue of homelessness in our city. There's health concerns. There's spreading of infectious diseases. There's human waste, standing water, vermin, loud amplified noise from typically they're near highways. There's safety concerns. Crime occurs at much higher rates in encampments. They're sort of targets for predatory people who are dealing drugs or trafficking people. There's people know when that monthly check comes through, and like so people in encampments are they're preyed upon. Houston does not endorse sanctioned encampments. Some cities have done it. It's not a housing solution. So what Houston has done that's so unique, and it's a combination of different entities working to close encampments down. And not one single entity could or should do it alone. We're lucky enough to partner with the city of Houston, Healthcare for the Homeless, Harris Center, HPD, with an approach that's non-punitive, engagement focused. And essentially how it works is we've identified an area, an encampment. We spend some time engaging with folks there. And then the week of what we call, it's a surge, HPD comes in Monday or Tuesday, some point early in the week, and issues a notice to vacate. You're on city property. You're on the transit property. You're not allowed to be here. You have until Friday to leave. You can't camp here with a tent and all this stuff. So we've already built relationships with folks in the area. So for the rest of the week, from that moment on, we are offering housing solutions. We are offering a chance to get off the streets right here, right now. The opportunity is a temporary housing, a very low barrier option. And the person is enrolled in permanent supportive housing. So they're already beginning the work to get into their own apartment. It partners, pets, possessions, it's coming with you. You know, we're not telling people you have to leave your dog behind, or no, you can't go with your partner. So you're immediately connected to a navigator and starting the housing process. So your stay at a temporary housing solution is short. We want it to be brief. And then enforcement comes Friday. That's where we partner with HPD. And if someone is declining housing options and they're still there, it's a ticketable offense, and HPD handles that. It's quick, it's fast paced, and something I'm proud of is I have a fantastic team. And that timetable it's not lost on them. We know we have to work quickly, but recently someone was saying no. He was like, I'm not interested in doing this housing thing. And one of our partners was, my team kept going back over and over and throughout the week. Hey, multiple times a day. Hey, think about it. You know, you could do this, you could do that. So we do not skip empathy or compassion in lieu of timeliness and being hurried. And I still remember getting the call that they were like, he said yes, we're taking him there now. Like, it was a huge win. And there is a hurriedness to it. We're working on very tight timetables, but them putting in that work throughout the week, multiple times a day, and then to hear he's taking it. He's taking these housing options. He's enrolling into housing, into permanent supportive housing right now. He's on the way off the streets into housing. Huge win. So yeah, work with very skilled, very smart people, also very compassionate, very empathetic. Fortunate to work with those folks.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo what Phil was saying, I mean, the compassion and the empathy are such an important part, right? So encampment closure, I mean, one of the most critical parts is that there is some kind of enforcement, right? Or that there's some kind of physical closure to it. So early on, when we were doing these encampment closures of like Chartres and kind of the area down by Wheeler, the city went in and fenced, or TxDOT went in and fenced, put up chain link right around the area so that people couldn't return. And that was important because when you're doing encampment work, for every person that you move out, if you don't do anything about it, someone will just come behind. Literally, my teams will say, they're like, we moved somebody out and the next day someone was in the tent, right? Like someone picks up the lease, you know? And so it is really important that something comes behind. So while we don't want our clients to be subject to enforcement or any kind of punitive measure, you do need something there. So our outreach teams, whether it's on encampment or just in general, we always have that goal of housing. And so they're coming in with this very empathetic approach, try and help people understand the severity of it, the urgency of it, and to really make sure that they have choice and autonomy in what happens next, right? So that is kind of a little summary of some of our really special outreach teams. I think there's one more thing here. Yeah, this question comes up all the time. Oh no, it flashed? I probably used some really fancy thing I didn't know how to use on PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, so if Houston is so successful, why do I still see people on the street, right? Like this comes up all the time, and it's a complicated answer. But I think things that I'd like to kind of highlight is that the population out on the street is a mix of people from all different experiences, all different homeless histories, and they are eligible for different types of housing, or maybe ineligible for some of the housing that we have available. And so sometimes the people out on the street are not able to fit into like the housing resources that we currently have. So our community is working really hard to make sure that we do have housing solutions for every different type of population. And as we work to really, end street homelessness and hopefully end chronic homelessness, right? It does mean that we have to have different and unusual and unique solutions that we've never had before. We have to have housing for people who are experiencing serious mental illness. We have to have housing for, folks who have sex offenses, where traditional housing structures don't always work. And these are things that we really are starting to work on. The other thing is that a lot of times we see people in really congregated and tight areas. And some of that is because of the amazing growth that Houston has gone through, right? The more that Houston builds up, the fewer places people have to tuck away. And so homelessness kind of then starts to force into certain areas where people build, communities and encampments and areas where they feel safe or they feel supported or they have community, or they may not be bothered. And so that, sometimes that just optically looks like it's getting worse when really it's getting quite better across our whole community. And the other thing, just, we did a whole separate session on this, but is that Houston has made a ton of progress in housing. Right now, we have lots of different resources coming in because of some of this COVID relief. It's mostly for services. And we're very fortunate that money is coming in. But one of the challenges is that there is a lack of affordable housing in Houston. And we're kind of on this bridge of crisis here where there's a shortage of affordable one-bedroom units that will take subsidies and work with our clients. And so I could do a whole separate session on that, but it is becoming harder and harder to actually move people into housing. There's a shortage of housing. And so we have stalled. It's not increasing the homeless population, but it certainly has slowed some of the great progress that we've made, especially in like our encampment work and that kind of thing. So just something to share. I want to pause there. We do have a few minutes, and I think one of the most important parts of doing these is an opportunity to ask questions. So use the chat box or feel free to unmute yourself. If you have a question about anything we talked about today, anything related to outreach, or really just anything related to homelessness in general, we'll certainly take our best stab at answering it. So there's a question in the chat from Hillary about how do you refer a person you see on the street to begin the process? So this is a little tricky, right? So you can call in if you're concerned about somebody. One of the biggest outreach teams in the city is HPD's team. It's called the HOT Homeless Outreach Team. And HPD officers that specifically work with homeless individuals, and they'll go out into the community. They can do assessments, they can help coordinate into our system, but they are a great first resource in terms of going out and seeing people. Like I shared earlier, a lot of searches outreach teams are really specialized and they're geographically bound, or they're working with a specific population. So you're always welcome to call us, but we typically will not just go out and check on clients, just in general across the community, right? We try and rely on some of our peers and partners who do more generalized outreach work than specialized outreach work. I would say if you are talking to people though who are experiencing homelessness and they don't know what to do, you can tell them to come to search, but I try and avoid people coming here and then getting bounced somewhere else. That's really frustrating for people, right? So when people kind of come here, we're usually referring them somewhere else. On coordinated access and housing assessments and that kind of thing, we're really trying to find the people who are experiencing homelessness out in the street to do the assessments. There are some drop-in centers, and that's a great way to get plugged in. So like our friends at the Beacon in downtown, that's a great place for people to start who are kind of entering the homeless system or aren't sure what to do. They can get connected to lots of resources there. And the other great place is shelter. If someone's experiencing homelessness and they do plug into a shelter, they will get plugged into the housing systems and all the other partners that they need.